Welcome back to Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. This one is entitled Getting Away Scot-Free. Back in my days at Tiny Middle, when I was a computer technician, we were in the shop there and we had 5 or 6 guys, I don't know, probably more like 4 or 5. And there was this one guy that we had whose name was Seth. You didn't want Seth to work on your computer. You didn't want to deal with Seth working there. Seth was an asshole. Seth would write the most hideous work notes in each of these work orders when people would bring their computers in to be repaired. So Seth worked in the evenings, and the only reason they really kept him around was because we had these add-on sales that we had to do. We had to sell customers antivirus protection and a program called Malware Bytes and this other one called Tune-Up Utilities and all this other useless fucking bloatware software that would end up just fucking their machines up. And we had to sell them new batteries for their laptop and all this other shit that was just add-on, money, 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 money. That's what it was. This is an interesting one because this story actually involves the use of a prop, which we'll get to. Now, like I said, Seth had the most hideous work notes. If I got a computer in and the problem description was will not turn on, oh boy. It didn't daunt me that it won't turn on. It daunted me that when it says will not turn on, that could mean that it does turn on, but nothing shows up on the screen. That could mean that it turns on and the post display would come up on the screen and it wouldn't boot. Or that would mean it would actually boot up into Windows and everything was just fucking fine. You never know. So will not turn on was not a good omen. Because it meant just fix it. Anyway, Seth had worked the evening before. Oh, and my notes, by the way, is like the first screen, the first note, I would write exactly like this. First boot. Powered system on. System turns on. Posts, but will not boot. We'll run diagnostics. And then you'd go to the next note where I'd say diagnostics found that the hard drive has failed and blah, 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 so that needs to be replaced at a cost of whatever the fuck we're going to rape you on, and etc., etc. Okay. Seth would get a machine in like that, and his notes would be replaced hard drive. That's it. So you don't know what he actually did to the machine, how he found out the drive was bad, what he did, anything. We don't know. So he was hated for that, especially by the boss, but they kept him around because he would sell all this useless shit, so that's why he continued to have a job. You suck the right dick, you keep your job. It's that simple. Anyways, the story goes like this. Seth worked the night before. I came in the next morning, and Seth wasn't there. And I have this laptop where, will not turn on, and I had found that the hard drive indeed was bad, and it needs to be replaced. So I called the customer up, and I said, I explained, okay, listen, I've looked at your machine, and I found that the hard drive is bad, and we need to replace that, reinstall the operating system. Do you have any data on the old drive? Now, just because a drive is bad, that doesn't mean that you can't get the data off of it. A lot of times you could. A lot of times you could. Depends on how and where and why it failed. Some drives just wouldn't even spin up, and that was the end of that. Other drives would be perfectly readable and seemed to work fine, but they were deemed bad by diagnostics and needed to be replaced anyways. So I called the guy up. Okay, hard drive is $60 plus the installation labor for that, and then we got to jerk you off and install the operating system, so that's another $100 on top of that, whatever, blah, 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 blah. So it'll come to a total of $200 and something. Oh, and do you need your data backed up? Yeah, actually, there is some stuff on there I'd like to save. Yeah, go ahead with everything, and I'll call you later. Okay, very good. So here we go. First step after finding out the hard drive is bad is rip the laptop apart, take the hard drive out, and hook it up to my terminal I had on my desk. And how do you connect a bare drive? Well, you get one of them USB adapters that goes to SATA and IDE. And I had such a device right there. Well, it so turns out that the night before, Seth had borrowed this unit. Depending on the type of drive, you sometimes needed to hook power into this gizmo, and other times didn't. The one I had at this time was a little box, and on one side it had the SATA connection for hard drives, one side had a connection for a laptop IDE hard drive, and the other side had a connection for a standard desktop size 3.5-inch IDE drive, and there was a power cable. Depending on the type of drive would depend on where you plug the power cable in. If you had one of the older desktop IDE drives, you would plug the power cable into the drive, and that USB adapter thing with the pins to line up on there would plug in and plug in USB. It would get its own power via USB and transfer the data and do whatever it needed to do, provided, of course, the drive was good. So Seth had borrowed this little gizmo I had, and for whatever drive he had, he didn't need the power adapter. I guess it was a laptop IDE drive. I don't remember exactly when this was, but they were around. So he had borrowed that. Now, this particular USB hard drive adapter thingy was made in China, of course, and the power adapter that I had for it was actually cable tied down to my workbench. We had these metal shelves and they had these holes in it, and I had cable ties going around and strapped this fucking thing down to my desk so nobody could walk off with it. Seth didn't need that adapter for the drive he had. So he either had his own or he just had a laptop IDE drive or something like that. So he borrowed it, and although this almost never happened, this time he decided he was going to be nice and put it back on my bench. Now, a lot of people had borrowed this thing, and sometimes they'd be nice and they'd put it back on my bench, which means they're on that side of the room, my bench is on this side of the room, and they just go, choom, just throw it. Okay, whatever, it survived, it's there, and when I need it, I just plug the power thing back in and plug in the drive, and hopefully I get the data off of it, and that's that. So I get this guy's laptop drive out. And Seth had taken the time to plug the power connector back into this little box, which I was going to need for this drive, because I think it was a SATA drive. But because it was made in China, it was plugged in wrong. Now, this is a Molex connector. So here's the prop. This is a dual cold cathode fluorescent light set that you would use to dress up a case for all the fucking gamers and shit. And these are cool white. Pretty interesting. I actually have a bunch of these. Found them real cheap online. And I was going to use them for under cabinet lighting. It never happened. And this is outdated stuff. They have LEDs now. But at the time, this was prevalent. Anyways, I guess it'll be a little hard to show you because they cable tied the wires up, but you'll get the idea. So anyway, notwithstanding any of the rest of this stuff, here is a Molex connector. It's got 4 pins. Now, do you see the top edge of it has those little slanty things right there? Okay, now when Seth plugged the thing back in, he plugged it in backwards. But you say, well, how's that going to work? Because the little slanty things, the connector on this box has the slanty things and the pointy sides aren't going to plug in. Well, China. They made it out of this like rubbery material, which worked, but if you plug it and you don't pay attention, you could plug it in upside down or backwards or whatever you want to call it. So now I want you to take a look at the wires here. Red, black, black, yellow, or yellow, black, black, red, depending. The two blacks are grounds. The yellow is 12 volts and the red is 5 volts. What happens if you plug it in backwards? You now send 12 volts where 5 volts is supposed to go, and only 5 volts where 12 volts is supposed to go. Bad things happen. So me, not knowing that Seth had borrowed this thing and plugged it in fucking upside down, I go and plug the guy's drive in, plug it into the computer, and I get a puff of smoke on my bench. Oh shit, holy fuck, what just happened? This drive was working before, now it blew up, oh shit, and then I see that the power connector was plugged in upside down. So it sent 12 volts to that little green circuit board on the bottom that only needs 5. And something blew up, let the magic smoke out, and that was the end of the guy's drive. Now we can't get his data. Now we can't get his data. I think actually in this case, he had a virus on the machine. So I explained to the boss what happened. I said, this was not me. Seth had used this because I actually remembered that he asked me if he could borrow it before I left for the day before. And he put it back and I said, look, this plugs in the wrong way, and that's how I found it. I would have thought he would have known enough to plug it in the right fucking way and this would have never happened. Well, shit. Tell him that the virus was so bad that we can't get his data. This might have happened in the old days, but not much in the Windows days. You know, Windows Vista 7, all that. You wouldn't get viruses that would just destroy the drive like that and make everything unreadable. In the old DOS days, oh yeah, that could definitely do it. That would certainly happen. But not much in the Windows days, because Windows would sort of try to prevent that from happening. Didn't always work, but most times it did. So because of Seth, this guy's drive, we let the magic smoke out. And I called the guy back and I said, yeah, listen, I'm really sorry. You know, we've plugged the drive in, but unfortunately the virus has taken such a stronghold that we're not actually going to be able to get the data off of your drive. And he said, that really feels good. Yeah, just continue on what you're doing, and don't worry about the data. Okay, thank you. And of course, was the one that splooged when they got his money, but that was the story. Now, what happened to Seth? Nothing. He got away scot-free. Maybe the boss talked to him. And then, of course, Seth yelled at me because the boss yelled at him for his own fuck-up. So I yelled at Seth, and I said, don't borrow my shit anymore. So he was like, yeah, fuck you too, you know, and then we just carried on, and that was a general day at Tiny Middle. So that was that. Getting away scot-free because you sucked the right dick. That's what it was. Yep. Said many a time, it's not what you know, it's who you blow. That holds true even today, in any job. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe, and take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.